everybody, to the Tuesday edition of the Daily Cheat Sheet. Obviously, breaking news is the BBB got past the first round. It's got to go to the House next. Getting Republicans to agree on anything is a miracle in itself. And they didn't get Republicans to agree on everything, since 3 Republicans did not vote for the BBB. And J.D. Vance had to come in and be the tie-breaking vote. Golan, before the show, one of the things we discussed was we all vote for our party or for people for specific reasons. Now, when it comes to Trump, obviously he had a lot of first-time voters that came to the Republican Party. And a lot of them voted for safety, security, the border, free speech probably, DEI, trans issues. I don't remember any of them saying it had to do necessarily with the national debt. And this is one of those things you're never going to make everybody happy. Go on.
It's true. I think if you look at the voter base, everybody has their own stuff that they are focused on, but it's pretty universal, at least what the top tier stuff is. A lot of it was border security and illegal immigration issues. Some of it had to do with how their children were being dealt with in schools, trans issues, things like that. But ultimately, what we're really talking about is money and kids. If your kids are all right and your wallet is all right, everyone seems to be pretty happy. And at the end of the day, when you look at what's going on right now, in the second Trump presidency, everything seems to be on the up and up. And since everything is, it's often weird to me to see how much pushback is coming Trump's way as we move forward. It's really interesting when you think about DEI being removed from so many institutions, something that I think most people, most sane people, I should say, are very for. If you see that despite people's agita about tariffs and what was going to come as a result of it, myself included at the beginning of the process, looking at how the economy is blossoming right now, looking at how Wall Street is up, all the rest, hard to complain. Looking at the border, I don't think I've seen so many days with 0 illegal crossings in my lifetime. And so all of that, plus the fact that we were able to take out the nuclear program of one of the world's worst bad guys and all the rest, it feels like we should all be celebrating right now. And yet, all over the place, I am seeing people complain time and again on Bill Maher's program. They had a series of people on his first 100 days in office, Trump, and they were saying, oh, thank God, it's the worst first 100 days any president has ever had. And people were really whining, complaining. And I kept thinking to myself, what exactly are we complaining about?
And by the way, to your point, I brought up to you before the show, in Trump's first term, when Ben Stein was, I want to say, debating his former coworker or colleague, David Gergen from the Nixon White House. And Gergen said the same thing. And Ben said, you mean worse than the Civil War? And I thought that was such a brilliant response of the first 100 days of being the worst. Man, I want to go to you, Mark Wayne Mullen, who seems to be very honest. He wrote, largest middle class tax cut in history, boosts take-home pay, permanent border security, mass deportations, no tax on tips and overtime, lower energy costs, made in the USA manufacturing, increases child tax credits, 507 plus billion deficit reduction. That's Mark Wayne Mullen. I like the guy very much. He seems to be very intellectually honest. And again, to Golan's point, the reason I brought this up was because there seems to be something with Musk. And I think he's being extremely dishonest. And the reason I brought up those things first was because that's always what I remember him running on. I don't remember Musk ever talking about cutting the deficit by trillions. Every point that Musk wanted, Trump has done.
I think I could see Musk's point of view, which is the deficit keeps on growing. No matter which party's in office, the deficit keeps on growing. We're trillions of dollars in debt. At the same time, he's laser focused on the deficit, but you have to take into account all of the other things that are in this bill that we're getting. Yes, a 68% tax reduction to the middle class. That's huge. That's tremendous. We're getting $50 billion to build the border wall. We're getting $100 billion to deport the 20-something million people that Biden let in. There's so much good in this bill. Of course, it would be great to get the deficit to zero, but just focusing on that one item is kind of foolish. So I think Musk is hyper-focused on this one item, the deficit. I don't know why he's hyper-focused on that and on nothing else. but there are other things that are existential threats to this country, like the border and immigration and crime and everything else that need to be taken into account. So this may not be the perfect bill, but it's definitely the best bill that we have so far right now.
Well, I want to go back to you, though. I want to go back to you because you've been really spot on. You have been correct about the tariffs and you've been correct about giving things time. So, my proposal is Jared Isaacman is what this is all about. And for those that are not familiar with Jared Isaacman, he was the one that Trump was going to appoint to be the head of NASA and a close friend of Musk. And when he pulled that position, and that appointee, I think Musk went off the rails. Somebody like Musk is not used to being told no. It's the only thing that I could make sense of this because, man, everybody loses in a bill a little bit. That's part of a deal. That's part of a business deal. So that's the only thing I could point at.
I started diving into the Isaacman thing for a minute. The guy was extremely qualified to run NASA. He started out as a kid who just had an affinity for aviation and wound up becoming an astronaut, did spacewalks, wound up taking lead at SpaceX's rocket missions. The guy was great. I'm not sure what happened there. And yes, he was Musk's guy, but I don't think we know what's going on in Musk's head. I don't know why.
Pure speculation.
It's all speculation. And what he's doing, he threatened to, if this bill gets passed, to form a new party. That new party, what's important to note is that not one Democrat voted for this bill. So not one Democrat voted to secure our border, to get rid of the illegal aliens, to give the tax breaks to the middle class, to get 5 or 6 million able-bodied people off of Medicaid, to require able-bodied people that are on welfare to go work, get a job. These are all common sense issues. Not one Democrat voted for any of that. And if Musk creates a new conservative party, he's just going to split this one party that we already have in this country, right? The one conservative party that the country has. And it'll allow the other party, the Democratic Party, to have a monopoly over power and control. So I don't doubt that Elon Musk is a patriot. He's definitely pro-America. He's a First Amendment absolutist and all of that other stuff. But I think there's a mistake being made here. And I think I have a hunch that it has something to do with ego, because nobody gets this wound up over a mediocre bill. You know, this is either way, it would be mediocre. This is not a be all end all. And the other thing Musk is not taking into account is the trillions of dollars of investment that Trump is bringing into the country. And if we lower our interest rates, which is going to happen sooner or later, our deficit will start going down. So with all the added production that we're going to be, that Trump has brought in, that we're going to be creating, the job growth, the economy, the boost to the economy, which is already showing signs of it, that deficit gets reduced, not just by cutting, but also by increased production. So I don't know what's going on there. I hope he comes to his senses and gets back on his meds or gets off of this trip.
Go on to his point, though. It's the inflation has gone down 1.5 points. And listen, none of us are economists. Listen, I did a show last night with Ben Stein, right? And I know, Golan, you listen to it often. And Ben's an economist. And I had said to him, every economist has been wrong on Trump. Every single economist has been wrong on Trump. But by their estimates, we'd be 1928 people jumping off of buildings. By every single, remember Jamie Dimon from Chase? We're about to fail. Everybody, we're about to fail. It was like listening to the generals on TV when the Ukraine war started. Russia will win in 13 days. That was all of their thing. And look, health prices down. So many good things have gone down with his economy, Golan. And at a certain point, you have to look and say to people in the Republican Party, not just saying, okay, but cheering this on, screaming from the rooftops, this is a success. What more do you need?
It's amazing, too, that right now, when people think about the economy, many people look at their wallet, look at how much things cost, look at how much gas costs, all the standard kind of reasons that you measure things, and they feel good. But every time you read about the economy in the mainstream media, they say the economy is a mess over and over and over again. We keep hearing that. Even people who are actually pro-Trump seem to be writing stuff like that, but blaming other people. But they're not really looking at what's happening, that the tax cuts that he's proposing, they work. They actually do rev up Main Street. They actually do help the common person. Blue collar workers are seeing wages go up. We're watching the tariffs, which, again, I will admit, I was worried about at the beginning. I'm still curious to see where they land in the long run. But so far, so good. I had my tantrum. So did many people. But if you recall, even when I had mine,
I'm looking
and it's
at men
true, right?
smile as you're talking. I'm
Well,
just
no, because
looking
look,
at a
we
smile.
had the conversation on this show where I explained, and I think in a very measured way, not hair on fire, why I was worried about what was going on with the tariffs. And it had to do with the haphazard way they were being applied. I still think I was right in a lot of cases, but I also recognize that the long-term plan, it wasn't about how they were being applied. The long-term plan was still kind of an economic jujitsu, right? It was using leverage to force respect. And ultimately, it's what men said. And when he stared down China, especially China, when he stared down Europe, what he just did to Canada, making them look like not Canucks, but cucks, you can't deny that the tariffs worked, right? It revived some kind of this new American industry kind of vibe, and the world didn't end as people thought it was going to. And the theory, and this is why I think so many economists get it wrong, the theory that they worship has to do more with spreadsheets versus reality. They live in this fantasy world of perfect markets and rational actors and things they've seen 1,000 times. But Trump doesn't deal that way. He deals in human behavior. He bobs and weaves depending on what's going on. And one of the things that I really liked, he changed things. That was the thing that really made me respect what he was doing even more. When he saw that something wasn't working, he shifted. And it's kind of like they were angry at him for just trying thing after thing and then shifting and bobbing and weaving. When I look at them telling us that everything's a disaster, even now as we feel good about it, it feels like they're mad because they were rooting for disaster. And Trump's success kind of threatens their grip on influence. That's the only way I can explain it.
You know, there's two ways to look at the tariff thing. There was the hysterical media, which was saying that everything's going to get burned down and nothing's going to work and blah, blah, blah. And he's erratic and one day it's on and one day it's off and he doesn't know what he's doing. And then there's the other way of looking at it. And that's a guy who's willing to adapt based on the information as it comes in. He's willing to bob and weave to make these deals happen. He's willing to be flexible and give these countries more time to come up with a better trade strategy. I mean, everything that the media was saying about this turned out to be wrong. And everything that the people that were saying, look, this is measured. This is a guy who's willing to review, analyze, introspect, these are all attributes that they never attributed to Trump. And the guy was doing it in real time in front of them. And the only hypothesis they could come up with was that he doesn't know what he's doing and it's all over the place. This is turning out to be great. Look at the Canadians. They just did that thing the other day with the digital tax, and then they had to remove it a day later. If you look at it as this is a guy who wrote The Art of the Deal, blah, blah, blah. If you take it from that perspective, where he comes at you and says, I'm going to put 500% tariff on everything that comes out of your country, the best thing you could do is say, what do you want? What do you want, Mr. Trump? And he goes, I want you to remove your tariffs from our goods. Do it. Just do it. He's not coming to you saying, name your first child after me. He's just saying, treat us fairly. And all these countries are grandstanding with their woke ideology. Oh, we're going to stand up to the big bad racist. It doesn't work. They all capitulate in the end anyway. So that's where we're at. And it's turning out to be true. It's turning out to be right. The proof is in the pudding. It's working.
Go on. I'm not always as nice as men. I do speculate a little more. And listen, when we bring somebody up, we're not knocking them, a word men loves to use, but we can appraise the situation. And I'm very glad Elon Musk bought X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. I think he saved the First Amendment for sure. But again, going back to the point, I remember his biggest issues being what were his daughter or son transitioning without his approval. The border was a huge issue. He would constantly like everything America First Legal was doing with their lawsuits about the border. Those I remember being massive issues for him. Massive issues. And today, Lia Thomas, the swimmer, got stripped of all her medals. That's what the Trump administration...
His medals. He's a dude. He still has his twig and his little berries. The guy was a dude when he was competing as a swimmer. Then he just grew his hair long, put on a female bathing suit, and started competing against women and stealing their trophies, their titles, and their scholarships.
Either way, go on. You get the point. He got stripped of all his medals. DEI is leaving almost every major company in the country right now. These are massive successes. These are massive. successes go on. I don't get it. For the life of me, I have to look at it for what might have angered him. I'm not going to speculate about what anymore about what Elon Musk's problem is. The problem, though, is when he starts threatening to primary every single person that pretty much voted for every single thing he cares about, minus a few things in a
We
bill.
have to be fair to Musk, right? And I'm going to get to where the other flip side of this is too. But the idea of government spending is something that did matter to him. This is one of the reasons why he volunteered to be a part of the government. Is one of the reasons why he helped in the creation of Doge and the Department of Government Efficiency, right? With him as co-chair. He did care about this stuff, and he was functioning specifically to help budget audits and agency streamlining and to find billions in savings, which he was able to do. And so I give him credit for that. The issue comes in when he started publicly condemning the big, beautiful bill. Because at that point, and it wasn't just condemning, he was calling it an abomination. It became obviously a personal thing. Part of that is simply because, and I think you're absolutely right, I think there was something personal going on there, a personal grudge in terms of what would happen with NASA, I mean. But I think there's also a possibility that it's simply a technocrat's misunderstanding of national governance. He is not a person in government. He may be a genius. He may be a guy who changed the face of the planet, and he will continue to do so. But the way he talks about budgets kind of reflects a narrow technocratic understanding of national governance. There's no other way to put it. He literally built his companies on government spending, right? If you think about how much money Tesla received from the government in 1 year alone, almost $5 billion in government subsidies. SpaceX, $3 billion almost in government subsidies, and on and on. He would not have been able to build the companies that he built without having that. He doesn't really understand the whole debt to GDP ratio, as men pointed out. It's something that every time he's interviewed about it, he says stuff and you go, that's not quite right. You're not distinguishing between productive debt and consumption-based debt. I mean, that's just basic critical economic oversight. He doesn't understand these things. And I'm not saying I blame him for not knowing those things. Why would he? Efficiency isn't the goal of government, but it is the goal of business. So if he is a businessman, which is what he is, and he is going in thinking about efficiency alone and not thinking about resilience or long-term power or worldwide control or even credible deterrences and all the rest, then he's not thinking like a government official. And in the end, if you're going to ignore political things and social functions of federal spending, thinking that, everything is supposed to function like one of your private companies, I can see how you would get it wrong. The thing that you're talking about is when he went to the insane level, when it became, I'm going to talk about Epstein and I'm going to talk about this and I'm going to talk about all this other stuff. That clearly was A, as men pointed out, off his meds, and B, as you pointed out, a personal grudge. But the rest of it was him just not understanding what government is for. That's it.
Let's not forget he did pile drive peasant. Okay, I mean, let's not forget he pile drive the guy. And Mend, I want to end this with you though, because I do think this is extremely important because I think the point you brought up. He is still one of the most powerful men in the world, if not the most powerful man in the world, with one of the most powerful platforms. And it's extremely dangerous. It's like having restraint of pen and tongue. There's it's restraint of fingers to keypad. Just relax for a few seconds and look at the bigger picture. And you're not going to get everything you want. But look at the amazing things he's been given. I don't get it.
I haven't seen Elon articulate what the actual issue is, so I don't know what it is. I know that he is on the side.
You mean in the recent tweets, or you mean overall?
Overall, get it? Yeah, the deficit. Great. We all understand that. But there are other major issues to address. The deficit is definitely not the biggest one. I think that crime, immigration, and the border is way more important. Tax cuts, absolutely more important. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't want to speculate. We don't know what's going on with him. What's in his head? Is it about his NASA guy? Is it about something
Sam
else?
Altman?
Did he get snubbed? Right. Did he get pushed out when they did that other deal with OpenAI for the UAE, for that giant, whatever, the $50 billion that they're putting into AI? Who knows? The bottom line is that if he creates a new party, then he's going to split the conservative party. He's not going to affect the Democratic Party at all. And just attacking every conservative that was going to vote for this thing from the sidelines is going to incur the ire of the president, who's trying his hardest to get this over the finish line. So from a strategic standpoint, it doesn't make sense what he's doing. From a practical standpoint, it doesn't make sense what he's doing. And from a a goals oriented standpoint, he's not achieving his goal. The bill's going to get passed. So I don't get it. It's bewildering. And I think Elon is a very smart guy. I would not say that he doesn't understand economics. I wouldn't say any of those things. I don't get it. To me, it feels like there's a huge something else going on here.
Look, I think you're not wrong, but I think it's important for our audience to understand why I'm saying that the misunderstanding of economics, especially on a government level, is an important part of this, because maybe it's cynical and maybe he's lying, but he does not seem to understand the difference between productive debt and unproductive debt. I want to just explain this very, very briefly for our audience to understand. Productive debt has to do with like infrastructure and education and defense R&D and semiconductor self-sufficiency. The idea is generating future returns and strengthening national capacity. It's something that, yes, we are going to spend money on, but it's not just reckless debt. Productive debt matters because it pays off in the long run. Unproductive debt is where you're like doing tax cuts that don't pay for themselves, or you're doing corporate giveaways with no conditions, and ultimately can add to the deficit without long-term gain. Those two things matter. What Musk is doing is saying all of it, he's lumping it all together into just this amorphous blob of insane spending. And he's failing to distinguish between the two things, between investment and waste. And those are things that you don't think about if you are running a business on the same level you do in the government. So I think there is a misunderstanding there. Either that or he's being cynical and he's lying to everybody when he pretends he doesn't know the difference.
I want to thank you both. I think you both gave amazing assessments of the situation. But Golan, the one thing you're forgetting, and men too, that you're forgetting to bring up. So I'll just give this as an example. Murkowski from Alaska, who is not a Trump supporter by any means, she voted for impeachment. For her state, it was extremely important, the Medicaid stuff. So she had them finally do an agreement. So that was why she voted in this case to go with the bill. Right. So this is the point. What Musk doesn't realize is that every senator needs something or wants something for their constituents. That's very different than business. So I understand why Susan Collins voted no, because she's from a state that might vote her out every time she runs. So I forgive a person like Susan Collins. She needs cover. This is something Musk doesn't understand of how this works. And a lot of people, even that work there, don't understand how this works. There's give and take. I want to move on, though, because I'm Musk out, and I still have a lot of respect for him. And I pray that he could come back and say, you're right, I just overreacted. I pray that that's the case, because I like the guy. I want to move on, though, because this is something that nobody has spoken about. During the Tucker Carlson-Ted Cruz debate, I wouldn't call it a debate. I would call it just a mock, snide, sneering hour of got you moments, is when Ted Cruz said Iran has tried to kill President Trump. And mockingly, Tucker Carlson said, well, if that's the case, let's go nuclear on Iran. I mean, if somebody's trying to kill the president, we got to go attack them. And obviously afterwards, Ted Cruz showed 2 cases of people trying to actually kill President Trump. But Iranian clerics have called for the fatwa of Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu. Now, for people that are not familiar with what a fatwa is, that is a call for an assassination.
Okay, so a fatwa is more than just a call for an assassination. Yeah. It is a call for all Muslims who fall under the umbrella of this particular ideology to target that person no matter where they are and no matter how long it takes. If you think about someone like Salman Rushdie, he, as an example, had a fatwa against him because of the Satanic Verses, a book that he wrote. And for many, many years, you watched him with a lot of security, always around him, one of the most secure people on the planet. And decades and decades and decades, nothing happened. And everyone kind of forgot about it. It became part of his routine to mention, my life's in debt. And people would be like, I guess fatwas aren't that big a deal. And then not long ago, somebody stabbed him in the face. And it had to do with that fatwa. They were just waiting and waiting and waiting. This is not something that's just like I hired a hitman and then a couple of years go by, nothing worked, and then we let it go. Or there's one guy out there that's been hired to take you out. This is everybody who possibly could get near you. It's like when John Wick walks into the village and every person from the dog walkers to the kids under the bridge are all assassins. That's what a fatwa is. So we're at a point now where Tucker Carlson is scoffing at Ted Cruz for saying this, but it's not fear mongering. He was stating documented facts. We've seen this not once, not twice, but now just today, there was another article about how the top Iranian clerics are calling once again for fatwas against Trump and Netanyahu. This is not new. Okay, the senior Shiite Muslim clerics in Iran issued this religious edict condemning them to death. And I think it's the third time in the last month that someone has said that, but they've been called warlords by the Grand Ayatollah, saying, you broke Islamic law, and now you must suffer. And the horrific punishment he called for specifically was the muharid, which is not just execution, but also suffering and torture. So just lovely people. And yeah, I think it's something that we should be aware of, because all those people that said, Iran, these people are someone else's problem, keep missing the fact that over and over again, they say death to America, and then they specify, as if we didn't know, our leader.
You know, the fatwa against Trump reminds me of the fatwa that was put out against Larry David in that Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. It's hilarious that Trump spared the guy's life, and the best they could come up with, one, is they claim that they kicked American and Israeli asses. I don't even know where to go with that one. And then they put out another death threat against the president of the United States. So it vindicates the president. It makes guys like Tucker Carlson look retarded. Candace Owens, same thing. Obviously, Bannon, all of them had no idea what they were talking about when they were lamenting that we're on the verge of World War III. None of it happened. We took out a threat. And as I said yesterday, it doesn't matter how far we set them back. What matters is that for the first time, an American president bombed their nuclear program, took decisive action in the nick of time, and set them back. And if they try it again in 3 months, or they try it again in 3 years, they know that the Americans are willing to do this, and we can do it. And the Israelis can come in and do it. Hopefully by that time, the Israelis will have their own bombs and they'll be able to just take it out on their own. That's where
Amen.
that leaves, right? That leaves all of the pundits who were saying that we're about to embark on World War III and Trump shouldn't do it. And they tried everything in the book. They put maximum pressure on the president not to do that bombing campaign. He did it anyway, showed true leadership, did it anyway. So in the coming months and years, we may have different administrations in office, but the Iranians know that that is a line that was crossed and it could be crossed again now. This is a thing that should have been done with the North Korean program, as we previously stated. They could have taken it out before they developed the nuke. They didn't. And now North Korea terrorizes that entire regime, that entire region. So they did the right thing here.
Mend might have the sharpest take on that. And I'm not trying to make Mend's day, because I've never heard anybody else say that. What Mend is saying is that Trump has set a new red line for future presidents, that it's no longer the threat of we will take out your nuclear. We will take out your nuclear. Be missile ready for us to come if we feel like you're close to enrichment or close to threatening either Israel or any other ally we have in that region. It's a brilliant assessment what Trump did.
The Iranians were always operating on the assumption that the Israelis couldn't do it because of their missile defense systems and the capabilities of Israel flying there and doing all that stuff. They just thought it was impossible for the Israelis to do it. Plus, they had the Israelis surrounded by the Ring of Fire. The Israelis couldn't do it because Hezbollah had hundreds of thousands of rockets pointed at them. And Hamas, same thing with all their rockets. So this was a perfect opportunity, and the president took it. That's the big thing, is that this president took the decisive action that needed to be done in the nick of time, and he did it. And now that veil, that protective veil that the Iranians thought they had around themselves is shattered. It's gone. It's never going to come back.
So I think the thing that it is, it's not just about rewriting the red line. It's about, before, the red line was threatening, but without following through. It's not just that we threaten falsely. So if Obama had said in Syria, for instance, this is our red line, and then when Assad crossed it with chemical weapons, said, okay, time to go ahead and do something about it because you crossed the red line, instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to write you a strongly worded letter about how I don't like that you crossed my red line, that showed weakness. Here, Trump said the same thing. We have a red line. The red line is this. You have this many days to deal with that red line. They crossed the red line. The difference here was not a rewriting of the red line. It was a following through of the red line that was set. And that, to me, is what shows the backbone.
And what's so important about what you just said with Obama not taking action on Syria, Syria turned out to be a paper tiger. That regime fell in a week to a band of guys that were riding around on pickup trucks with AK-47s. The entire military apparatus just collapsed within a week to a bunch of guys on used Toyota pickup trucks with AK-47s. And Obama was afraid to take action on his own red line against that country. That
you have to remember, though, no, but in all fairness, you're forgetting one thing. They lost a major part of their military when Israel took out Hezbollah.
But by the way, this is a perfect example of what Med's talking about. The idea of fear preventing us from doing what is necessary. Do you know, as an Israeli, I heard over and over and over again my entire life that Hezbollah is the one that we can't go up against. Not after they did the stockpile of weapons, after the UN supposedly was corralling them in, which of course they never did. We knew that if we went to war with Hezbollah, they were going to destroy such major parts of Israel that it was going to be almost non-recoverable. And then one cool pager operation later, Hezbollah basically didn't exist. And the same thing with Syria, the paper tiger, as men pointed out, and the same thing even now as we see with Iran. Now, Iran had a lot of ballistic missiles and hypersonic missiles and all the stuff that we've seen destroy cities, but they also were a lot weaker than we expected them to be. And a lot of the stuff that they were doing was performative. And we expected that also to be the World War III scenario, which is one of the reasons I don't like that we didn't finish the job there. But the idea of us saying, if you screw around, we are going to go in and take care of this. And then we didn't for years and years and years out of fear, to Men's point. And then when we finally did it, it was like, we could have done that a long time ago, if only we hadn't been controlled by that fear. I think that matters. And Trump basically said, you got 60 days. It's day 61. What fear? And then he took care of it. And he showed all of us that maybe that hesitation is what's been killing us for so many decades.
Just to go back on the finishing the job, I was the one who was advocating that they should have killed Khamenei. And my attitude towards all of this, and people always, you hear people giving pushback on that. The Israelis had a term called mowing the lawn, where they would go into Gaza every few years. They'd have to, every few years, the good people of Gaza would shoot one rocket too many, and it would land in a playground. And then the Israelis would go in and they'd kill a whole bunch of top Hamas leaders. And they called it mowing the lawn. And like, look, this is what we got to do. When they pop up, you got to, and people are like, oh, they're so gross. They even have this term called mowing the lawn. Cause and effect, right? You shoot some rockets into Israel, you're going to get smacked down. And I think the same thing should have been applied to Iran. This leader that you're calling a religious leader, I'm just calling him a big goon. He should have been taken out. They should have killed him. It would send such a good message to the people that nobody is above the law. Love that line. Nobody's above the law. So they should have taken him out. I don't advocate for regime change. I think that's up to the people in Iran, but they blew up everyone in prison. They killed a ton of their top commanders. Now's the time for the Iranians to rise up and actually take their country back.
It was also a great Steven Seagal movie. But let's move on to the last topic. This is really important how we label people. It's extremely important how we label people. So Trump today came out and labeled Zohran Mamdani, God forbid the future mayor of New York, as a communist. He's not a communist, okay? He's a wannabe jihadist cloaking himself under the guise of socialism. That is exactly who he is. This guy is a dangerous figure. And we have a lot of dangerous figures in the House right now, elected, unelected, soon to be elected, that share the same sentiment. Okay, this isn't just about Jews. This is death to America. They are jihadi sympathizers, and part of me thinks if they could do the mission themselves, they probably would. So we have to correctly label people who they are. It's like when people say we're going to become a banana republic. They're often confused between a banana republic and a dictatorship. Let's not confuse ourselves with who this person is. He's a wannabe jihadist that, given the opportunity, he would slaughter and mow people down. And there was a girl on X yesterday, I'm not sure of her name. She had the most brilliant take. She said the reason why Muslims on the streets all lay down their prayer mats like they do in force, it's like a dog peeing on the ground. They're owning their territory. And I've never heard somebody say that before. And when she said it, I was like, holy crap, that's such a brilliant thing. And that's what they're doing right now. And it's starting in New York. It's happening in the House, where they're laying their prayer mats on the ground, marking their territory, and we have to call it as it is.
Well, first of all, that's 100% the case. You can look all over the world at places that are being overrun by these Islamic societies where they're putting the prayer mats in front of trolleys, in front of buses, in front of train tracks. They're doing that not because they don't realize that they're oopsie going to stop public transportation or bring day-to-day life to a halt. They're doing that deliberately to let everybody know, who do you think has the power here? We do. And they don't shy away from saying exactly that. There are videos of people talking to these Islamists, and the Islamists are like, hey, I just had 7 babies. You didn't have any. We're going to rule the world someday, and you're going to be nothing. This is just an Islamic country waiting to happen. All of that, they know exactly what they're doing. There was a social media post yesterday that I saw where someone who had fled Iran because of all the crazy stuff they had seen, moved to New York, and they were videotaping from the top of their apartment, way down on the street in New York. And there were all these Muslims with their prayer mats out, and they were hitting themselves and hitting themselves and hitting themselves with objects and with their hands. And the woman wrote a whole essay about, I know what this is, even though it's being dubbed just freedom of religion. They're doing their religious thing. It's just a ceremony. It's not that. It's something that actually had been banned once upon a time because they do it so much that it draws blood, and the blood sprays all over the floor. And part of it is to show their firm commitment to Islam and all of that. But part of it is also to let everybody know, we don't care about this life. We don't care about this body. The thing that we care about is dying, taking out the infidel, and this world doesn't matter. Only the next one does. We love death like you love life. And that's why we're willing to destroy our own bodies. And she saw this intimidation ceremony, essentially, as they were doing it and doing it. And she finally went downstairs. This is in her essay. Went down and spoke to the cops, who were like trying to stop people from getting in the way of this beautiful religious ceremony, only to explain to them what they were looking at. And it used to be banned because, of course, spraying blood on the street is unsanitary and could get people sick. And it was something they were just allowing to happen because they didn't want to be deemed Islamophobic or racist. So the idea that they are doing this inadvertently, putting their mats in the middle of the street, blocking traffic, putting it wherever they want, instead of holding away in their mosque like every other religion does if they're going to practice something like this, is not an accident, and it is not an anomaly. It is deliberate, and it is targeted to make everybody be afraid and clear out for the caliphate that's coming.
Brilliantly said, Golan. I'm really glad you brought up that story. I was not familiar with that story. Mend, again, we have to call what's actually happening. It's we're sugarcoating it, and we're going to sugarcoat ourselves to death.
I think it's a wake-up call that our immigration policies are all messed up. We allowed this to happen. We allowed them to invade. This is not immigration. This is an invasion. So if there's no more drastic, alarming vision when you see them take over Fifth Avenue and they're all bowing down and praying in the middle of the street when they could easily go into their mosque and do it, that's not about prayer. That's about dominance, as Golan so eloquently pointed out. They are trying to show you that they are a force to be reckoned with, and that they're here to stay, and that their way is going to be the way. And then you hear them talking about the amount of children that they have versus the amount of children that the West has, and it's only a matter of time. And they're right. That's the scary part, is that they are right. That is what will happen if you continue down this path. A lot of places in Europe are realizing it, and it's too late for them. But here, we can still save this country. Immigration requires assimilation. If the people don't assimilate and become like you, then they recreate the places that they fled from. And why would you want that? Why would they want that? Makes you wonder, what are they fleeing from? Why are they, Why would you flee somewhere and then do the exact same thing as the place you ran from? And I'm saying that both to the Muslim invaders that are posing as migrants, and I'm also saying that to the lefties who move to right-leaning states like Texas, and then they vote the exact same way they did when they were in California, which destroyed California. So this is a wake-up call across the board, where if the people don't assimilate, if they're not interested in becoming like you, they don't belong in your midst.
You're 100% correct. And Gone, lastly, and I brought this up, and I'll keep bringing this up. We needed Joe McCarthy, a sobering sort of Joe McCarthy. And I'm thinking of two people, and I was kidding with Lindsey Graham last week, but there's two people that are great senators that I don't think have presidential hopes, especially Josh Hawley after him running through the Capitol, that image. But he's a great senator. He's fantastic. And a guy like Tom Cotton, I really wish they would set up a commission on this stuff. I don't see any reason. I think most Americans would be fully on board with this, even if they would say, oh, don't do it. You're rounding people up. Most people would be extremely happy. And those are my two picks. What do you think about that?
About those two picks, or about
Or
the
any, yeah,
concept in general?
the concept and those two people.
I think we need to weed out the anti-Americans running this country into the ground. Okay, and you know what? I don't know who it should be. I haven't given that enough thought. I'm sure you have, and those ideas sound great to me. But the point is, it should happen. And ultimately, if you look at why this country is unraveling, and I mean it from the bottom up, because what Trump is doing is trying to hold on to a lot of what literal conservatism, trying to conserve certain values, trying to conserve certain concepts. But it feels like law abiding Americans, a lot of the time, are being treated like villains, while terrorists and criminals and America haters are getting seats at the table. And our government is infested with people who hate this country and certainly hate our allies and certainly hate goodness versus evil. I told you that on my other podcast, on Jew Can't Handle the Truth. I had an episode all about the Democrats' Jewish problem, where I just went through name after staggering number of names of people within the Democratic Party who hate the Jews, who love SJP, who love Hamas and Hezbollah and all or even if they're not using those names, all the allies of the terrorist groups are being supported by these people. And it's not something that you really have to dig. I used to be an investigative reporter, but I am not one anymore. And those skills have atrophied. I didn't have to dig too hard to find out these people's histories and what they're saying on a day-to-day basis. And when you look at the people who are in the pocket of a lot of the politicians, or the politicians themselves, as you've pointed out a number of times with a lot of even the woke right and of course the woke left, we are in a world now where elected officials and bureaucrats and school board members and agency heads apologize for terrorism. They justify anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism in the name of resistance. We've heard that a zillion times. They undermine the military. They're censoring free speech, canceling people or labeling everything racism so everyone shuts up instead of speaking their mind. They're cheering on open borders. They're despising the Constitution. As Julie, our guest host, Julie Levin, pointed out when she was on, over and over and over again, these are ideological saboteurs. And if we have a modern day McCarthy, okay, I know that McCarthy gets a bad rap. We've talked about that a little bit. I know that right now, when people hear that word, Hollywood has made it something, good night and good luck, everybody. George Clooney's going to let you know what you should be doing.
Or guilt by suspicion with the, right.
Or De Niro. But by the way, 1,000 other versions of that too, where they let you know this is the worst guy in the world. When we say McCarthy, it's one step away from Hitler, right? But the whole point was, I want people who are trying to destroy this country out of government and out of positions of influence. So you say what you want about McCarthy. At least he had a spine. Was he flawed? Sure. But did he understand the threat of subversion and try to do something about it? Yeah. And he wasn't worried about the optics, because back then that wasn't a word. If you were a threat to the Republic, it was time to do something about it. And we need that kind of perspective and that kind of fire now, to break the deep state, to get rid of these unelected bureaucrats, to get rid of radicals inside of Congress, and on and on and on. This Marxist ideology is spreading faster than we've ever seen it before, and Mamdani is a perfect example of that. Not a communist, but a socialist jihadi is someone who we cannot have running our largest and one of our most important cities. And that's going to spread if we don't do something about it under our boot heel now.
Yeah. Bravo.
Yeah, I don't think
Look,
either of us. I don't think either of us could follow that up. And
you
just
can't.
so you
You
know, I was
can't.
having
That was
this.
fantastic.
Yeah, that was fantastic, Golan. And just so you know, I was having this discussion with Ben yesterday at lunch because I said every never is coming. Everything we thought was a year away is a week away. It's here right now, and I really you put it brilliantly. As we're running out of time and I want to close up shop, I need to correct myself because I think this is the better part and the amazing part of the story that I didn't accurately say. The University of Penn stripped Lia Thomas of her medals. So, because of the pressure that President Trump put on them and is putting on campuses, they did this themselves. It wasn't done by a judge, it was done by the University of Pennsylvania, I believe his alma mater. So we have to give credit sometimes to the schools that are actually acting on it. So bravo, University of Pennsylvania. Would you agree with that, guys?
Yeah, I think obviously they were bowing to the pressure of the Department of Education, the Office for Civil Rights, was doing an investigation about Title IX violation, and so yeah, I think there's an element of fear there. But at this point, I honestly don't care why. I'm glad that they were able to do this, and I think that if it was a Trump effect or whatever you want to call it, this action I think was the right action.
Men, final thoughts.
Well, this action and along with the Harvard action. So, stripping Thomas of his medals that he stole from female athletes is justice. That's the way it should be. He should have never taken those things in the first place. If he had any class, he actually wouldn't have competed on his own merit. Like he would have just dropped out and not competed as a fake female. He's not a female. I mean, the fact that we're even arguing about this today's day and age, it just tells you how insane. There's going to be kids looking back at this in 25 years from now and going, you were arguing about what a female is? How
Let's
stupid.
pray.
How
Let's
stupid.
pray.
Yes, they will. The kids these days are way sharper. They're not buying into any of this. So the right thing was done there. And then they just hit Harvard with civil rights violation for violating the civil rights of Jewish kids in Harvard. Systemic, both by faculty and by students, and the university did nothing about it. They may have even assisted the people doing the harassing. So right now it looks like they're going to lose all federal funds, which is something like $400 to $600 million a year. I think they should take away their tax exemption status, and then they should look into who's actually funding that organization. Hurt them, not just smack them, not just get them to say, oh, change your policies. They'll change it for 4 years. Secretly, they won't. Secretly, they'll still be discriminating. Secretly, they'll still do that entire dance that they do on admissions. They want a certain type of people in. They don't want Jews. They don't want Asians. They don't want white kids. So you can't just say,
Although,
all
by
right,
the way,
change your ways.
that's actually happening too, right? That even after they said we were going to stop doing certain things, then this is at the initial stages. They immediately started saying, okay, I want you to write in your essay certain buzzwords. We'll make sure you still get it if you fall into these categories,
Of
which
course.
was illegal.
The problem is that the people at the top, the people running these things are infected, and you need to get rid of them. They need a top to bottom overview and clean house and start with a new slate. So the administration getting them to put a couple of people on the board and not accept so many kids from certain countries or whatever, that's a Band-Aid. I think they need to hit them really hard, take away a ton of funding, look into where that money's coming from, really hurt them, and then they'll change their ways. Otherwise, it's just a Band-Aid. It's not going to go. It's not going to do anything.
I think you're 100% correct. And again, I want everybody that's listened to today's show to Google every single thing that we've said, especially about somebody like Joe McCarthy, who has had his name tarnished and put through the mud. There were a lot of communists in our country during the Cold War, in the government, and in Hollywood. Those are facts. And we oftentimes talk about how brutal we are as Americans. As bad as the internment camps were, go on amend, any other country would have killed them. Any other country would have killed communists if during a Cold War they had communist sympathizers in our country. We did not. We had hearings. Okay? Nobody lost their lives. They might have lost their livelihoods. Big difference between us and every other country at that time. So it's important that people know the facts of what Joe McCarthy did, and people might disagree with me, and that's okay. But we had a ton of subversives, and we got to weed them out, like men said, in all areas. Like both of you said, we got to get rid of them in every single area. Okay, go on.
By the way, I'm just going to say that if you, again, for all of those who are looking at history, look at what countries killed communists after they decided to do their investigation and capture and all of that. You're talking about everyone from Indonesia, South Korea to Greece to, of course, Iran and Turkey and Chile under Pinochet and on and on and on and on. There's country after country after country that did that. And I love that people like to throw in the U.S., who never executed a single communist, as far as I've ever seen. Okay, they blacklisted, they surveilled, they deported, they imprisoned certain ones that actually broke the law. But everything was about saying, do you belong in a position in which you can influence other people and you are deliberately trying to undermine the foundation of this nation? Now, I understand that freedom of speech means we have to be careful about that, and we want people to be able to speak their minds and all the rest. But that doesn't mean we have to give them a soapbox that they can stand on, like what happened pre-Obama when they were talking about race relations in the United States, and the numbers were skyrocketing. People, black, white, all colors, were saying this is the time when we are coming together. It was like a big Benetton ad. And then post Obama, when he started pointing out all the differences and telling everybody, you should be feeling like you're different, you should be noticing. And then suddenly race relations plummeted. And that is the kind of thing that is dangerous to do and destroys a country, destroys a people and a population. And we see it happening to this day, what Obama started with that. Why would we give those people a platform if we don't need to? And if we have a way of weeding them out?
Okay. On that note, that's a wrap. I'm thinking to myself right now, that song by Benetton, Cyndi Lauper, True Colors, will be on my brain the rest of the day. So thank you for that, Golan. I want to thank everybody who's been downloading our episodes on Apple, on Spotify. That's where you find us, The Daily Cheat Sheet. Also Substack, The Daily Cheat Sheet. Instagram, The Daily Cheat Sheet. Of course, YouTube, The Daily Cheat Sheet. And my biggest thing that I've been curious about this whole episode is each of you always has a perfect haircut. How often do you guys get your haircut? It looks like it never grows.
It's a great hard-hitting question, Judah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for. With that being said, I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are. God bless you all. Come on, that was funny.